Welcome back to SharkMakers Teen Innovators, where we turn real ideas into reality. I'm your host, Jenna Allenderry. Today we're joined by David Malone, an experienced software developer, architect, agilist, automator, and cloud technologist at AWS. David works at the intersection of innovation and infrastructure, helping teams design systems that are not just functional, but scalable, resilient, and built for the future. Thank you for joining us today, David.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
To start off, can you tell us a bit more about your role at AWS and the kind of problems that you work on as a software architect?
Yeah, certainly. So as a solutions architect at AWS, we help support customers in a variety of ways. First of all, I'm in a worldwide role, so I work with customers around the world. And then my specialty for the last few years at AWS has been in IoT, or Internet of Things. That can include solving everything from building simple connected smart light switches or light bulbs to helping autonomous vehicle companies get telemetry off of vehicles, remotely stream video off of those vehicles, things like that. There's also what's called industrial IoT. I don't necessarily work as much in that particular industry, but you just envision manufacturing facilities and there's all sorts of devices, machines that are moving things around the shop floor. There's sensors there's needs to get telemetry off those sensors to implement applications like predictive maintenance solutions so we can avoid costly downtime. So those are the types of things that I commonly help customers with today.
Absolutely, very interesting. So in today's workshop, you taught students a bit about architecture for their products, and that's a concept that can maybe sound very complicated to students. So how would you explain software architecture in simple terms, and why does it matter so much?
Yeah, so it is a complicated subject, and obviously you can spend a whole lot more time than we had for it tonight, but architecture in its simplest terms are how to bring a set of business problems or business outcomes to technology solutions to help actually solve those. So that's one of the most basic ways to think about it, and that's really a solutions architecture type approach. There's multiple types of architectures out there today, everything from down in the hardware, the computer architecture itself, all the way up into the more solution space that I just talked about. And so one of the easy ways to think about it, a friend of mine years ago coined this. He might not have actually coined the term, but he used it and I learned it from him. We call it boxes and arrows. So basically, how do we pick the different pieces of what we need to build a whole end-to-end solution, and how do we make them work together? So that's in some sense what an architect does. We can drill down a little bit more and we can go down into the specific software stack that's being built. We can help select the correct databases. We also look at things like security, just to make sure that people understand and implement security correctly. Those are the basic general categories. The ilities, as I kind of talked about them today as well. So for those of you that might be watching this, if you're interested more about architecture, I would go and do an internet search for that. What are the ilities? What is software architecture? How do I think about implementing those things? There are talks about this category on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Recently in my own school, in debate topics, we've discussed like end-to-end encryption in communication technologies, and it's a big issue with government intervention maybe in those tech companies. So definitely, again, something to think about. But in an entrepreneurship program like SharkMakers, students often get bogged down in the pitch and the idea and the sort of creation of a new idea. But how does architecture fit into turning those ideas into something scalable and marketable?
Yeah, so if you make some of the wrong decisions, I'll use a term that we use at Amazon quite often. It's important to look for what are called the one-way door decisions versus the two-way door decisions. What are the things that once I've gone down this certain path, there's really no coming back from it? That's super important. Oftentimes in software architecture, that's not the case, right? A lot of them are two-way door decisions, but you want to be cautious about that to begin with. So you might make some wrong decisions up front, and that's okay for those two-way door decisions. But it's the more painful ones that you want to avoid up front that would then lead to major rework that will cost your business significantly in the long run. As an entrepreneur, that's the right way to think about it. And so maybe a little self-serving, but cloud provider is one of those fairly big ones. There's ways to make and design systems so that people, what they call multi-cloud, or your system is portable between the places that you can deploy it. Then there's ways that can take advantage of that particular benefits that you get from that particular cloud provider that may, in fact, cause your system to be less portable, lift and shift, and move around, but it might be more secure to begin with. It might give you more benefit for your money right out of the gates. And as a matter of fact, that's why AWS serves startups so well, because again, many of the world's largest startups have started on AWS, have made certain decisions, have utilized AWS's services and best practices like the well-architected review to help make sure that they're doing things right from the get-go. And that's the other thing too, is what we have available through the well-architected review takes learnings from all these customers and they just give them back to anybody else so that you don't have to start from scratch and kind of bang your head against the wall and learn things the hard way. So those are the things to think about as an entrepreneur. Your reputation is at stake, your business is at stake, and so you want to do things the right way to ensure that those hard-earned customers continue to be maintained and served on your platform and on your product the way that you intend them to.
Absolutely. So you're mentioning those one-way and two-way door mistakes, or those sort of point of no return mistakes. So what's probably the most common mistake maybe from your industry experience that you've seen teams make early on, and what could they do differently to avoid that?
Yeah, some of those things would include, again, there's a spectrum of technology choices to make out there across what we typically call a technology stack. Many of those things are really flexible, but once you get into a large enough code base, regardless of the flexibility of the technical framework or the technical design choices that you've tried to make along the way, you've made a fairly significant investment in that particular code base. I've often worked with code bases in my past that are multi-million lines of code. You literally can't just take that and go say, oh, let's just go build that using something else because this is now too difficult for us to use. Those are the types of things that can be costly. Same thing with databases themselves. And while you can move data between specific databases, then there's so many types of databases out there today, some that really scale well for certain scenarios and some that really don't, and some that scale well for the other scenarios that these didn't. And so to have a mindset where you're going to need to continuously learn, to be able to break off pieces of your architecture and apply what's called an evolutionary architectural approach, and to be willing to pivot, are all things that are absolutely necessary. What I think people get stuck in is actually the rigidity of the solution, and then they paint themselves into a corner and they think, well, I just need to keep throwing more at that, instead of allowing for all these other exploratory and evolutionary approaches to be taken in your technology architecture.
Absolutely. So an open mindset, just as in ideation, applies to technological architecture and backends as well. And today, again, you've taught our participants about that backend and how it operates, and there's a lot of information, as you were saying, to discuss days and weeks worth, but what's one thing that you'd want our participants to take away from this idea of architecture? Yeah,
again, security being job zero, take care of your customers, don't make that an afterthought. We touched a little bit on some of the aspects of security. Many times security can feel like it's very overarching and requires you to do a lot of things, but you just can't afford to deploy something today that violates the trust of your user base in any way, shape, or form. Actually, especially as SharkMakers is moving towards this focus on solving accessibility needs, there seems to be more than likely some relation to what's called PHI or other types of solutions that maintain either patient data or personally identifiable information. That's even more sensitive of a level of information than just general users using things like just examples like Yelp to look up restaurant reviews and things like that, so it just applies a higher level of scrutiny. So again, security, think of it as your job zero. Don't think of it like right before you're about to launch the product and then be like, oh crap, I didn't think of any of those things. So maybe we should do that now. Don't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can definitely become an afterthought in a time constrained program like SharkMakers. So it's good to have from the get-go an introduction of security. And you're mentioning that you now started to work more in AI throughout the years, and in recent years we've seen a quite quick rapid rise of predictive or analytical AI being used in our world. So from your experience, how would you say that in product production, how should AI be used, or how can it be used in these?
Yeah, I would say it's interesting. The history of AI is way longer and more storied than you might imagine. So AI in general has been around for quite a while. We've been using it for years. The advent of some of these tools like OpenAI and some of these generative AI, which is a subcategory in the overall realm of AI and machine learning, those are the things that are driving a lot of the innovations today. That drives a different architectural style, but it's also not completely new. So as a result, let's not forget all these great principles, all these great learnings that we can continue to apply to agentic solutions. The other thing about LLMs, or large language models, in being multimodal is they can support multiple things with a single model that previously took many, many different models to build and deploy. There's still some cost trade-off to consider, and this is one of those like architectural exercises. It's like, cool, let's throw an LLM at everything. It's like, oh, hold the horses. That might not be actually the cheapest solution. So, but it might solve the most problems. But is that really worth it from a cost perspective? Those are the types of things that you really have to be careful and evaluate. But then there's ways to take these large language models and then turn them into SLMs, or small large language models. And so we can do some things to try to start to target the types of devices that are more commonplace. Like, can I get that to run on your phone? Can I run that on a smaller edge device? Is the cost of that edge device then going to be worthwhile to implement as part of my solution? So those are the things I would encourage anyone that thinks about architecture in the age of agentic AI and modern LLMs to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And then the final thing is just if you could give a one-sentence piece of advice or call to action regarding architecture in product production to our participants, what would that be?
Sorry, just a clarifying question. In product production, do you mean by in bringing products to market?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, again, security in that regards, as you think about cost and trade-offs, sometimes the cheapest solution isn't always the best one, but sometimes it'll get you far enough so that you can grow your business to the point where you can really make use of that other expensive solution that may have just been outside of your reach from an expense perspective before.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, David. And thank you guys for tuning in again. And we're very grateful to the role you've played in helping our students understand the key aspects of security and architecture in their products. We'll see you next time on Teen Innovators. Thank you.